Hello, I'm Susie Vance, creating from the heart the artistry of living, and I have with me Bud Powell. Hi, Bud. How you doing?
Hi.
So, Bud,
Yes.
I get curious about things. You know me. I just like to know about everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to take advantage of people who have had fun careers, things that they've loved to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to light other people's fires by their experiences. So I would like it if you would tell me, I seem to remember, because you're a friend of my husband's, that you went to college briefly.
I did.
Briefly.
I did.
And then you forsake that education for quite another kind. You became a...
Famous person.
No, you became a pilot.
I became a pilot, correct.
And how did that
And
happen?
backing up just a little bit, I dropped out of school after a year and worked on the Zimline shipping company, the boats, and from New York to Israel. I got a job on that boat, so I spent 6 months doing that.
Wow. That would make you decide to look for something you loved, right?
Yeah, and I loved that. And my thought was, if I didn't become a pilot, I would
Do that?
I'd go to sea, maybe. Yeah.
And so what took you away from that?
Flying was what I always wanted to do.
And how did you get into flying?
That's all I ever wanted to do. When I saw my first airplane, I decided as a very, very young boy, I wanted to learn how to fly and become
You're
a pilot.
just like my husband.
Yeah.
That's what he did too. He used to hang out at Pewaukee and watch the airplanes and think, that could be me.
Yeah.
So you always wanted to do that.
I did.
What was the first step?
The first step was I got a job with an aviation company, just working around airplanes. I eventually got my private pilot license on my own, and then I worked for another company that had mail and freight contracts. And I worked for them, working on airplanes and just doing grunt work. And at some point, prior to me getting my commercial license and my multi-engine and instrument rating and ATP, they decided to let me fly these airplanes by myself, which was highly illegal.
Really?
So they would allow me to pre-position airplanes around the Midwest where we had mail contracts and freight contracts. And eventually I got all my ratings and then flew for them for a few years.
And what took you away from them?
I stayed in that business for a while. I flew for other companies, small airlines that had mail contracts. I lived in the UP.
I'm going to think of you as my mail deliverer from now on.
That's what we did. I was based in Iron Mountain, Michigan for a couple of years, and we flew mail from Michigan, Detroit area, through the UP in Milwaukee. So I did that for a couple of years. And got tired of that.
You did?
It was all night flying.
Oh.
For 2 years. 2 years we never flew during the day. So it was all night
my
flying.
goodness. Woo!
That was enough.
Okay.
And I came back to Chicago and flew for some small freight companies. It was strictly freight throughout actually over the whole country. And we flew airplanes. We flew DC-3s. We flew...
I remember the DC-3. That was my first ride.
I flew airplanes that were older than me, far older than me. So we flew freighters throughout the Midwest, and I eventually got into corporate flying from there. I flew for some small airlines that became the regional carriers that are currently, but this is obviously the very beginning of that. This is in probably 1970, 1969, sometime around that. And then I eventually got a job in corporate aviation.
Ooh. What was attractive about that? What drew you to that?
I think I more fell into it than, to back up just a little bit, I'm a little envious of your husband because he wound up flying in the military. I always wanted to fly in the military, but I had some vision issues, and I couldn't have done that.
I remember those stories.
Yeah. So I eventually got into corporate flying. I was tired of flying freight, mail, and flying at night all the time. And it went from early 70s to the point where I wound up the last 25 years of my career. I flew for the Wrigley company.
And where did you go when you were flying for them?
We flew all over the world.
Oh my.
Little of our flying was domestic, almost all of it was overseas. So I've flown, the Wrigley company had factories on every continent. And,
wow.
And we went to all of them.
Whoa, you saw the world.
We did.
Is that part of why you liked flying?
I loved the travel. You know, it was a great combination. I loved airplanes. I loved flying airplanes. We had a great fleet of airplanes, and the places we flew were fabulous.
What is it about flying the airplanes that you liked? Was it, I mean, for my husband, it's a little bit of the mechanics. He loved the fact that he could, I think, play with this engine, you know, that he could manipulate it. He could do that. But besides that, for me, when I'm up in an airplane, I'm looking down at the earth, and that is mesmerizing. So what is it for you?
It is. You know, from a pilot standpoint, when you get into an airplane, you almost feel like it's alive. You know, you can get hydraulic systems running, and the blood is running through the airplane, and the brain of the airplane is coming online. It becomes a thing almost.
It's like a dance with a...
a little bit. Yeah, I never thought of it like that. And of course, I like looking down from an airplane too.
So, what would you say? I mean, you found your dream job, and you just kept, you know, it wasn't exactly in a straight line. It certainly wasn't when you were in college. You jumped ship. But what advice would you have for someone who is young, in college, maybe, or maybe not yet? What advice would you give them to help them on their way to finding what they really love to do? Because you were lucky.
I was lucky, and I think you have to follow your heart. You know, if you want something bad enough, you have to work for it.
Yes.
You have to hope for it. You have to do things to get you where you want to be.
Little steps.
Little steps, you know.
Like flying mail.
Ooh, that was awful.
Or working for airplanes without being in the seat.
That too. Unfortunately, your husband, Tim, is the godfather of my oldest son, who became a naval aviator, a fighter pilot in the Navy. And subsequent to his career, right, I hope to think that he followed me into the business. And now his son, my grandson, is going in the Navy as an aviator. So it's become a family thing. Nobody wants a real job. They just want to fly airplanes.
See, that's an attitude. I mean, that means everybody should be in a job they love, because then it's not a job.
That's right. It was a vocation. It wasn't a job for me. I loved, you know, there was barely a day that I didn't look forward to going to work, especially in the last, going overseas. It was always a challenge. It was always fun. It was always different. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it was great.
Good.
And someday I've taken my wife to some of the places I've been to overseas, and I hope in the future that, you know, I can share some of those travel experiences with her. I hope.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us. This has been fabulous. I hope it lit your fire. Creating from the Heart, the Artistry of Living, Susie Vance and Bud Powell.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was a